y'all. So I meant to get this video out earlier this week, but the weather's been changing here and it's been raining all week, and oh my goodness, did my head decide to come down with a hell of a cold. My first big thing with this video is I've been paying close attention to Donald J. Trump for a very long time. I'd like to think of myself as like a novice Trump-splainer, and there's something he said the other day that just really, guys, it caught me. He said that Canada cheated on a commercial, and then he said that he thought it was AI and blah blah blah.
I know you're too social about the Canada tariffs. Can you walk through when you expect those to take effect? And can I ask why?
No, we're gonna let them know. Ronald Reagan loved tariffs. He used them sparingly, which he probably would make a mistake. He made a mistake in that. And again, I was the biggest fan of Ronald Reagan, but on finance, on trade, it wasn't his strong suit.
Wasn't it though?
But he liked tariffs, and they totally changed that to say that he didn't, because they're catering to the Supreme Court, because Canada's been ripping us off for a long time, and they're not going to rip us off anymore. Canada has been ripping us off for a long time.
Why?
One of the most difficult countries to deal with has been Canada. As much as I love Canada itself and the people of Canada, they've just had a lot of bad representatives. They did a fake ad yesterday. They were caught. The Ronald Reagan Foundation was the one that caught him, and it was totally the opposite of what they said. So I don't like that. That's dirty pool, and you can't do that. And let me just tell you, they shouldn't have done it. And they've apologized, and they said, we're going to take the ad down. Well, they did it, but they did it very late. They let it play for another 2 nights, and now they took that ad down. So I don't know when it's going to kick in. We'll see. But
well, it wasn't AI. It literally, the video I'm pulling from, I actually pulled from the Reagan Library's YouTube channel. So I'm going to go ahead and cover it. I've got a lot of little bits that I want to put in there. But yeah, no, Canada didn't cheat. But I do think I know what he was trying to say when he said that Canada cheated.
My fellow Americans, Prime Minister Nakasone of Japan will be visiting me here at the White House next week. It's an important visit because while I expect to take up our relations with our good friend Japan, which overall remain excellent, recent disagreements between our two countries on the issue of trade will also be high on our agenda. As perhaps you've heard, last week I placed new duties on some Japanese products in response to Japan's inability to enforce their trade agreement with us on electronic devices called semiconductors.
This part right here. This shit right here. This shit right here. Okay, so I think this is what he was talking about when he said that Canada cheated, was that they didn't talk about the fact that in the speech he started off with talking about how he's putting a tariff on Japan. And I think that's what he meant by Canada cheated. The speech was talking about Reagan putting a tariff on somebody, and Canada didn't include that part in the ad. I think that's what he's saying when he said that Canada cheated. I think.
Now, imposing such tariffs or trade barriers and restrictions of any kind are steps that I am loath to take. And in a moment I'll mention the sound economic reasons for this, that over the long run such trade barriers hurt every American worker and consumer.
This part is actually really important. I think it's important to note that Reagan understood that companies would raise prices as a result of the tariffs. So ultimately, it does harm the American consumer.
But the Japanese semiconductors were a special case. We had clear evidence that Japanese companies were engaging in unfair trade practices that violated an agreement between Japan and the United States. We expect our trading partners to live up to their agreements. As I've often said, our commitment to free trade is also a commitment to fair trade.
When he says free trade, he is referring to trade with minimal tariffs. That was Reagan's whole deal. The Gipper was a free trader. And fair trade, it's fair. You know, the companies don't raise prices. They don't engage in shady practices of, like, oh, we're going to, bait you in with this price, but, oh, we only have 5 in stock of those. Isn't that weird? That's what he's talking about when he means fair trade.
But in imposing these tariffs, we were just trying to deal with a particular problem. not begin a trade war.
Tariffs are great for like surgical strike precision when you have a very specific problem that you want a country to deal with right now. You start charging them to sell that product to us. If you just put them all across the board, places don't want to sell the products to us.
So next week, I'll be giving Prime Minister Nakasone this same message. We want to continue to work cooperatively on trade problems and want very much to lift these trade restrictions as soon as evidence permits. We want to do this because we feel both Japan and the United States have an obligation to promote the prosperity and economic development that only free trade can bring. Now, that message of free trade is one I conveyed to Canada's leaders a few weeks ago, and it was warmly received there.
Remember when we were friends with Canada? Good times.
Indeed, throughout the world, there's a growing realization that the way to prosperity for all nations is rejecting protectionist legislation and promoting fair and free competition. Now, there are sound historical reasons for this. For those of us who lived through the Great Depression, the memory of the suffering it caused is deep and searing. And today, many economic analysts and historians argue that high tariff legislation passed back in that period, called the Smoot-Hawley Tariff, greatly deepened the Depression and prevented economic recovery.
When he brings up how it deepened the Depression and made a recovery harder, it's because of things like when you put tariffs on, it increases the price of the products. At the end of the day, it increases the price of the products. The companies will charge more. If they had to pay a tariff to get it here, trust me, they are going to charge more. They're going to charge you more for the product. That made the Depression last longer. The tariffs, people couldn't afford food. That made the Depression last longer. Right now, in 2025, people can't afford food. That's going to make this into a depression all of its own.
You see, at first, when someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. What eventually occurs is, first, homegrown industries start relying on government protection in the form of high tariffs. They stop competing and stop making the innovative management and technological changes they need to succeed in world markets. And then, while all this is going on, something even worse occurs. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. The result is more and more tariffs, higher and higher trade barriers, and less competition. So soon, because of the prices made artificially high by tariffs that subsidize inefficiency and poor management, people stop buying. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. The memory of all this occurring back in the 30s made me determined when I came to Washington to spare the American people the protectionist legislation that destroys prosperity. Now, it hasn't always been easy. There are those in the Congress, just as there were back in the 30s, who want to go for the quick political advantage, who risk America's prosperity for the sake of a short-term appeal to some special interest group, who forget that more than 5 million American jobs are directly tied to the foreign export business, and additional millions are tied to imports.
In 2023, the Chamber of Commerce pegged that number at 41 million jobs tied to imports and exports.
Well, I've never forgotten those jobs, and on trade issues, by and large, we've done well. In certain select cases, like the Japanese semiconductors, we've taken steps to stop unfair practices against American products, but we've still maintained our basic long-term commitment to free trade and economic growth. So, with my meeting with Prime Minister Nakasone and the Venice Economic Summit coming up, it's terribly important not to restrict a president's options in such trade dealings with foreign governments. Unfortunately, some in the Congress are trying to do exactly that. I'll keep you informed on this dangerous legislation because it's just another form of protectionism, and I may need your help to stop it.
Isolationism, nationalism, that's just not where it's at. And the Gipper understood that. The Gipper got that part. It's great that we had a hugely, like manufacturing heavy society in like the 50s and 60s when Trump was a baby and when he was growing up. That's great. I'm glad for the people of the 50s and 60s that that's what they had. But you look at China now. They have dark factories. They're just robots. They said you can go into a factory. You're standing next to a conveyor belt. It can be fairly empty, and then you come out on the other end, and there's a fully assembled truck there. The factories are in the dark because they're all automated. It's robots. Guys, it's robots. We're not bringing manufacturing back to this country. That's not going to happen. I'm sorry. We have to evolve beyond that because, quite frankly, the process of manufacturing has evolved beyond us.
Remember, America's jobs and growth are at stake. Until next week, thanks for listening and God bless you.
So that speech is done, and I think we can all see that it wasn't faked. It wasn't AI. They didn't cheat. They just didn't include the very beginning of the speech because really, advertising time is expensive, right? I don't know if he knows that. He's a rich dude. He's really out of touch. But buying ads, kind of pricey. Ads during big sporting events, even pricier. Reagan didn't love tariffs. He saw them as a tool in negotiations. But our president is not using them as a tool in negotiations. He doesn't like something and he tariffs them. He sees a politician got arrested in Brazil or something and he wants them to release them. 50% tariffs. He doesn't like the way that Canada is doing advertising. 100% tariffs. I mean, literally, some of these are like 2 a.m. tweets. Truth Social posts, but whatever. They're like middle of the night. This is not how Reagan used tariffs. I understand that tariffs are a great tool, and that is awesome. They're an awesome negotiation tool. But he's applying them to countries prior to negotiating with them. He's applying them across the board. He brought out a giant poster with just like all of these countries that were clearly just pulled from a list of countries and just tariffed them across the board. That's not using a precision tool. That's kind of being lazy, honestly. But anyway, I encourage you. I have links to the video down below if you want to go watch the video in full. It's a great speech. It explains tariffs to the people. And I think that he was a guy who's genuinely concerned about costing Americans jobs. Right now we're dealing with the recent numbers have been there have been 1 million reductions in force since January. 1 million people have lost their job. And he's all in on AI, and more companies every day, like Amazon is firing like 14,000 or something from their corporate office to deal with AI. I mean, we're a society of people that is rapidly being introduced to a world of companies that no longer need people or want them because we're too pricey. He has a mindset of an older time, and he wants things to come back that are never going to come back. America isn't going to be America in the 1950s again. I'm sorry, that's just not possible. Manufacturing is done with robots now. You're not going to bring those jobs back. Putting tariffs on countries because you dislike them as the president? Petty, and the only people you're hurting are your citizens. Reagan understood tariffs hurt the people. Trump doesn't get that one.